Here we are. We are going to talk about Never Not International Women's Day because this is going live after International Women's Day. I'm Andy Wright, and I am a co creator at Never Not Creative. And would you like to introduce yourselves? Prue, do you want to go first?
Okay, cool. Firstly, thank you, Andy, for having us on your platform to kind of kickstart this initiative. Thank you so much. My name is Prue Jones. I have. I think you put on the website. I have been a veteran of the creative industries now for yeah 20 something years, and I'm dating myself. Not literally dating myself, but I'm dating myself by saying that. I mean, yeah, I've been around for a long time. Yeah, I think with that, I shall hand over to V to introduce her.
Yeah, and I'm V Dewey. I've mostly worked in corporate America for about 10 plus years, formerly very entrenched in the US design community. So, and now I'm over in the UK working on my MBA. So, and also too, I am co-creative,
Cool.
never not creative. Sorry, didn't with Andy.
Hmm, that's important, I
Yes,
think.
That
it
is.
is.
So,
Oh yeah, I should probably say like you're in London, V.
Mhm,
I'm in Melbourne,
mhm.
and Andy, you are in Sydney.
I'm in Sydney.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So we are spread out, but united by Never Not International Women's Day. I think it'd be good for us to sort of try and backtrack a little bit and go like, where did this come from? And so obviously International Women's Day is coming up, Prue. And I remember when I said that to you once, you had like a reaction to, oh, International Women's Day is coming up soon. Do you want to
Yeah.
recount how that went?
Yeah, I was kind of like, yeah, it is. It's coming around again. I mean, like really, if we kind of think about the genesis of this whole thing, it was really just born out of white hot rage, um, because this, every year International Women's Day kind of rolls around. And I think again, as we've kind of summarized in some of our material on the website, whatever, it's usually women who are tapped on the shoulder, made responsible for creating an event that, particularly in the corporate world, where the people who largely attend these things are women. So it's women sitting in a room full of other women listening to stories about women that are inspirational, followed usually by all women in sort of networking opportunities, perhaps a morning tea with your fellow women, to talk about how how women are going. And I feel like, yeah, one part of the conversation is really missing, but also, like, do we have to do our own internal housework as well? The one day of the year that we get to talk about women's achievements has to be organized by women. Like, this is symptomatic of the problem to me, and as you can tell, gets me quite rageful. So yeah, when we were talking about this, it's kind of like, what can we do? We have to do something. We just, like it literally needs to not be International Women's Day until some shit changes, and that's really how this whole thing came about. And I know, V, you very much share my sentiments. Do you want to maybe explain how you feel about this whole thing?
In general, you encompassed a lot of my sentiments, but also too, I feel so much it just comes down to ticking the box. It comes down to a brand changing their male name to a female name. So instead of Johnny, it's Jane, and then putting pink on stuff. And I feel like that's people, especially in light of what's gone on for the last 4 or 5 years, people feel they can tick the box that way and then be able to get accolades for that for their corporation. So I feel there's a lack of accountability in the long term when it comes to this topic, and of course across every type of diversity need. But my problem is just I'm so fed up with ticking the box. So
Hmm. Yeah, something meaningful, something, something real. Yeah, because it's not really enough, is it, to have that one day a year that we kind of think about where women are, in the workforce or in general in society, and then for the rest of the 364 days per year, nothing changes, and it's literally back to business as usual until it rolls around again, and then we have the same conversations with the same women. And yeah, it just felt like we really needed to do something, um, yeah, to keep going, to keep marking International Women's Day every day until we see some actual change, until we see the needle moving. And one way of doing this is, of course, just like keeping that the conversation going. So once the inspirational speeches from inspirational women are over, you know, but we just keep the conversation going, and really that's what this platform is about. There's no, um, like you say, tick the box V or anything. There's nothing really to do with this. We just wanted the conversations to be up, to be heard, for people to be able to tune in anytime and just watch something. I was going to say inspirational, but some of it's quite angry, I think, and there's
Yeah.
absolutely nothing wrong with that.
And I think at the same time too, when we're talking about tick the box or talking about how we have this one time of year when people come together, yes, it's great that they're doing it, but it's not solving the whole issue because it's just a band-aid for the symptom. And I feel like with some of the conversations that are going to be presented, we'll get deeper because it's almost one of my other side projects is a project on decolonizing design. And I think is going back to the thought patterns, going back to what people think about. I know Daniele from Token Man, his conversation with Deborah Ray Burns of Propella, they're going to address a different perspective, but it's going back down to the thought process and thought patterns and what has been entrenched in us so long. So I think we're starting the conversation as this evolves because we start on the 9th, but we're going to keep going, not just the same content, we're going to add to it. So I think as we go along, it's going to have a perspective of where people will think about it
Mm-hmm.
more than just like, oh, yay, we're going to do this. But it's like, and sort of just bring the people to the table, but it's like taking a step back and hopefully people will reflect. Hopefully this will create a great opportunity for people to create a moment of reflection and really dive down more than just, okay, I've done this, I've helped support women, but it's like, but why are we here? Why is there's this issue? Because it's deeper than just bringing something to the table. It's more of a thought pattern too.
Yeah.
Is it more meaningful this year as well, just because of everything that happened over the last year and the fact that I think we'd seen progress actually stall if you read some of the research, but then actually women were affected even more by the pandemic. Is that does that kind of add weight for how important this is this year?
Oh, yeah, 100%. And particularly, it's so interesting what's happening here in Australia in the lead up. And I know it's made global headlines, right? You've been reading about it over there in London, what's happening in our parliament at the moment. Um, you know, I mean, there's just so much stuff has happened over the last year. But yes, particularly in reference to COVID, and the statistics have been called out many times about how women have suffered more with the effects of that and lost their jobs at twice the rate of men and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, these are really important conversations to be having. And yeah, like things just have to change. And it's I think it's that sense of rage. It's like, yeah, I mean, we see these things happening, and sometimes the only sane response to this is rage. And unfortunately for women, like we're not really allowed to express that very much. And I having seen some of the presentations come through, we're recording this now before we go live, obviously. But there is that sense of rage, and I think that this is something that really needs to be dialed up, because rage is what moves the needle. I mean, I think we're all just done being nice about it. I mean, how can we have a situation where women's livelihoods are taken away at twice the rate of men, and there's not people burning cars on the street about it? The French would do that. Like honestly, we need to mutiny a little. It's time.
It is. And the thought that,
Is there?
sorry,
No, you go.
and just the thought that in general, like all the progress we've made for pay parity and such has been moved back towards like what the 1950s stat almost. It's been some of the statistics that have come out have said. So there is that rage, and for me even too, just even some of the other details that this whole situation has gleaned. It's like we've gleaned from like even here in the UK, the right to have your partner while you're giving birth, having that ability, it's stripped away from you. There's been a lot of even details popping up, which is, as a woman, it's like, this is amazing that I think women have been able to do so much over the time that they've been able to balance work life, or balance, let's say, make through work life balance where you have your children, you have your full time job. But this is like showing how society didn't really acknowledge that at all, and it's an interesting time in general. And each time I open up my Instagram feed or my news feed, like even the fact with Nicola Sturgeon up in Scotland, she's almost having to apologize for, former ministers' bad behaviors, and that's the time and time again women have to do that. So there's so many different things coming out of this in this last year that the rage is needed. It's needed this time. So
And so, I mean, obviously, one of the things I quite liked about what you said at the beginning, Prue, was, International Women's Day is all about women, and it ends up being talking to women, and is not very good at engaging men who need to be, if men actually, it's funny, I started talking about this before as like part of the problem and therefore need to be part of the solution. Ultimately, they are the problem and therefore need to be part of the solution. What are your hopes for kind of how we can get this in front of men, and what reaction do you want to see as a result?
Oh, I don't for one minute think that there will be men coming in droves to see any of this content. Although I'm so heartened to see, the willingness on behalf of some men who are also quite fed up with the status quo, like yourself, Andy. That there are men willing to have the conversation, and particularly men. I mean, men really just need to have this conversation with other men. It's sadly, and it's a well-known fact, it's not women that are going to suddenly change men's minds. But one thing I wish that men would really take to heart is that we don't do this, or we don't, yeah, there's rage. There's rage around, not being paid adequately for the same job. There's rage around a whole host of issues that will come out in all the talks that are online. Rage is really not going to move the needle because, as I was saying before, female rage is wholly unacceptable, and that's one of the things that's really going to have to change until everyone understands that women can express that rage and use that rage to change the status quo. Then we're going to be a little bit stuck. And we need men to get angry on our behalf. We need men to understand that we are angry because on your behalf as well, because really this is about changing things for the better for you too, so that you are able to have more time with your families, for responsibility to be distributed more equitably in sense of work and home life, all of those things, to be able to express your emotions in a healthy way and not in ways that are literally fucking up the planet, and making things very difficult for the other half of the human race, which is us and also children. I mean, I think, yeah, there's men really just need to take a long hard look at themselves right now. They really do, and begin to change things for everyone, because they're still sadly the ones in power. They're the only ones that can do it.
V, you're on the other side of the world. We've seen some pretty shocking headlines as well of like, I think we keep, it's almost as if it has all come up at the same time, but we keep sending sort of like different news articles or comments of things that are happening, which are just bizarre, I think, at sometimes. I mean, it's the same all over the world, right? But how are your reactions to this, and how would you hope that men could start to be part of the conversation?
geez, I'm just like reflecting upon all the different news, messages I've pinged the two of you, and now I'm like, I can't remember because they just start blending together, because it's just like eye rolls. Like some businessman in London, what was it, beating, supposedly assaulted his girlfriend and then blamed her for his career failure, or something so ridiculous. And I just can't believe what some of the news stories I hear at times, almost convoluted, but I think if anything, this might be going off in the left field. But the two things, I was just listening to Prue and also reflecting upon it, I feel our mindset is, as a society as a whole, is based in the subjective, which is the here and now, not thinking about the further community. We need to switch. I feel like there has to be a switch to an objective where it's more of the community, more of the long-term perspective. It's not the individualistic mindset where it's they want the profit, they want what they want here and now. So I think and you can see that especially in corporate America, where at times I just feel when I see things announced, I'm like, it's gonna help their shareholders, their bottom, the quarterly reports, and that's what bothers me. And it's just because they're thinking, oh, we'll have all these initiatives or have this event, and then it reflects in our share prices. So that's the one thing I'm concerned. I think there has to be not just talking to the man, but I think it's just an overall shift, because even too, I'm probably go off on another tangent or another segue though too, where even women could be our own worst enemy. So I think it's both men and women. We have to collectively shift our perspective from the subjective to the objective, because yeah, if some company says they're going to put $10 million to training like post BLM, okay, that's for right now, but what about 10 years now down the line? So I feel people are just so reactionary. And that's my mind. That's where I'm coming from, and just thinking to build upon what you just said too.
So there's quite an interesting theme that comes up in some of the talks. So Nicola Mansfield talks about it'll never be not International Women's Day until we promote competence over confidence. And it comes up in a few other talks as well. Jane and Samita talk about feeling like, just like this idea of it's almost like you have to have so much more confidence to go for something, or to kind of stick your neck out or go for an opportunity. And I kind of, like you mentioned then, like sort of men and women in this situation. And it makes me think about how there are a bunch of men out there who do feel very similar to, the views that are in this whole platform, but probably don't have the confidence to speak up, right? In the same way that some women don't have the confidence to speak up. And I think that's part of like the challenge here is that you've got such a masculine top level that is almost just kind of keeping everybody else down. And I think once that starts to get removed, like we could be in a much better place. And we've already shown like a much more empathetic leadership approach wins hands down every single time. It happens to be coming from women at the moment. There's nothing to stop it from happening coming from men. But like, so there's something there that we can start to help the men that need to be able to take the step forward improve their kind of confidence levels in this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, the stakes are so high. I mean, this is absolutely men's problem to solve. You're the ones with the platform, and you're the ones that other men listen to. So, I mean, there's so much at stake. We are facing climate catastrophe, where we're seeing half of the population go backwards via COVID, and like whatever other agendas there are, sort of anti-feminist sentiment. Um, you know, it's really beyond time that, yes, there may be a lack of confidence, but like us, we just, women are just, they step up and they do it regardless, because we have no choice. It is about survival. And if we don't use our voices, though sometimes only with each other, but we absolutely owe it to all of us to be confident, to call all of this out, to just put a stop to it. It's just beyond time that there was action on so many fronts. And we saw with COVID, literally overnight, oh, nobody has jobs, quick, let's instate some kind of temporary income for people. It can be done. We could literally move mountains if the will was there. The question is the will going to be there? And will men have that will to change the shape that the world is in right now? Of this, like what's on this platform, this is just a symptom right now. This is one symptom of things going wrong. Yeah, things just need to change, and men are the ones to do it. So get on with it.
But also too,
That's my.
at the same time, I know, what, like as in the United States, women had to, like the white ruling Met class, which was male, we would not allow their own women to have the right to vote. So we had to fight for it. It's ridiculous. Like we've consistently had to do that. But I know this might not be a well-liked perspective, but perchance, because hearing some people or hearing stories about men who might voice and support it, but they just don't feel comfortable. They just don't know how to stand up because of the backlash that they might get. So I'm wondering also too, even though men have to stand up, there's that level of fear. So women, as we are all powerful and show our versatility, wondering if there's a maybe, especially with what we're doing on this platform, where there are some men voices speaking out, helping them and supporting them, because to start building that pattern, to start building that, because I don't think overnight there will be some outliers, of course, but I'm like wondering as a general, maybe some, so many of us are sick and tired of it, but I'm like, if we need to get it done, at least showing some support and giving them that little guidance, at least though too. So that's the one thing that
Yeah.
comes to mind.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe I was a little bit hasty there to sort of divide. It's not about men versus women. It's about those mindsets. It's that status quo mindset versus real leadership change. The kind of leadership that's going to benefit us and really help us to overcome the problems that we're facing, which are huge on every front. So yeah, I mean, the men that are willing for that change of leadership, absolutely are in the tent, right? And they they should have our 100% support. So yeah, so maybe it's more of a mindset versus a gender thing.
Mm-hmm. And I think even to just to piggyback off of that, it just comes to mind like the one talk, Tom Tapper, and what they did with Nice and Serious 2 years ago, even started reflecting upon their hiring practices for women, especially, and took the initiative to go and research this and see how they can adapt and how they can better improve their hiring practices. And that was 2 years ago. And still, it's just, you hopefully will see more of those popping up, especially when you see having more of a diverse workforce. Cindy Gallup we'll talk about that diversity across the board, but seeing, especially when we need to rebuild our economies, embracing that. And as a side note, when talking about rebuilding economies, look at some of the key women who are helping support that. Mariana Mazzucato, you have Kay Rayworth, from the Donut. They're the ones that are pushing forward to rebuild. So I think in general, embracing diverse thought definitely be key. So hopefully people take cues like what Tom has been doing.
Fear is a big topic that comes up across the board, and I think like from both sides. So there is a lot of the women who have, I guess, participated so far have talked about the fear of failure, the fear of like not actually making it up as you go, like not taking a leap and saying that you can do something that you can't, which holds them back. But then there are men that will not worry about that, and they'll go for that opportunity and they'll go for that job. But also, like, even speaking to some of the men that have been working on this with us and participating, I think we all feel pretty uncomfortable, right, about putting ourselves in this situation. But I think what everyone needs to understand is that fear and that uncomfortableness, which actually we embrace when there's a big opportunity in front of us, we actually have to turn into embracing into such a big opportunity in front of us now, which is to improve this situation. And I remember Daniele, who is obviously in one of the talks, he showed me, I was in his flat last year, he showed me the front page of the Daily Mirror. He made it to the front page of the Daily Mirror, and the editor of the tabloid called him a snowflake because of his Token Man initiative and the fact that we can't be blokes anymore, and we've all got to be so PC and now. But actually, I mean, we all know what sort of culture that is in some of those places. But I do feel like, if we can embrace fear in one way, we've actually got to teach ourselves now how to embrace fear to overcome this type of problem as well. Was there a point when I'm quite fascinated by this. Is there a point where you notice that, oh, wait a minute, I'm being kept back or held back because I'm a woman? Or is there a point where you've kind of got to this, you're like older, you got to the point where you go, oh, wait a minute, I was held back? Like, is there a conscious bit, or is there a bit where it comes to sort of fruition and you go, oh, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Oh,
Yeah, you can go
oh,
first.
I knew. I was even told at one company, somebody I brought in to speak, we're having dinner after their talk, and they're like, "Dee, they're not going to give you any more keys." Like this person, an external person, noticed that from our conversations. But even at the time, I know there were certain moments where I was like, "Yep," like just from actions, from responses. Um, and the one thing is, at the end of the day, for me, whatever I try to do is not to undermine anybody. It's just the way I lead, I just look for the better community. And so whatever I've done, I know, yeah, maybe I was speaking more than probably a director of mine. And then that held me back. And I saw it visibly. It was very visceral, but I would always try to pivot. And I have to say that made me even more determined to try find pivot. Maybe I didn't go, as vertical. It was a squiggly line, but having those moments of being held back, sadly, pushed me to go in other directions.
How about you, Prue?
Oh well, when did I like? If you're asking when did I realize? I think, unfortunately, you know, sometimes your career just feels a bit like wallpaper because you can't really see what's all around you. From the early days of you know even something as basic as Chris Kringle at Christmas time in the agency, and the MD having gotten you to give a Chris Kringle to, and gets you a red latex miniskirt, um, and then
Oh,
tells you
God.
later that he would have got me a pair of Perspex stripper heels, but they were too expensive. From that little sort of thing, then right through to like having somebody literally say to your face, "There's always been a glass ceiling for you here." I mean, where do you start? I think, yeah, okay. So the first example was, yeah, probably pretty closer to the 80s than now. But regardless, I mean, I think these things probably would still happen if it, now finally we have some more robust kind of codes around behaviors, and that would be very much frowned upon. But you still hear about these things going on. Um, yeah, I think all of this stuff is it holds you back, it undermines your confidence, and yeah, or it's actually an active way to hold you back. So it's yeah, it's just not easy, and yeah, a little rage inducing, which is how we come to be here today. enough of
Yeah,
this.
no, I was writing a reflective piece this past week, and at one point I listed out. I was like, in a previous, like through my career, I've been gaslight, bullied, threatened. I forgot what else I listed, but and I was talking with some ECD 2 weeks ago here in the UK, and they were saying that's how common is that though for women in work to have that? It's very common, which is sad, and it's just like it just hit me when I said that. I was like, when I heard that, I was like, yep. But that in reflection, I'm like, that's how in thinking about that, how many people have been held back by the gaslighting, by the bullying, by the threatening. I remember when I left one company and I had no guts to report a leader once. And when I was in my exit interview, I told my HR business partner what happened and all and who it was. The person just sort of shook their head like it was just probably being added to a dossier. And I'm like, for bloody hell, why? And just I'm just a microcosm. So
Hmm. Yeah, and it might not necessarily be happening to you
mhm.
personally, but you can see this happening to other women as well. So it might not be people holding you back themselves, but it's you watching other people being held back too. I mean, it's just an erosion of your confidence, and it's kind of like, why bother? And yes, of course, I'm not really getting anywhere because this is the fight that I'm in every day. I'm lucky to be here, you know.
Mhm. Totally. I know how that is. And even too, at one point, there was one colleague of mine, I'm like, I had to call him out once because even just like as a peer to peer, not a manager or a leader, but I called him out once because of I hate mansplaining and they apologized. I didn't use the term mansplaining by you, but I'm like, I questioned their actions. And then they did it again and again. I'm like, forget this. I'm just like, whatever. They're not going to listen to me. And that's when it makes me sad to think if I'm doing this, and to your point too, Prue, that's going to happen to other women and just defeats the purpose. So
Yeah, it's hard not to be completely demoralized, isn't it?
exactly.
And that's another thing just keeping you down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if we start to wrap this up, like, what would be, let's say you've got one of those, like, there's a woman who's struggling right now, or even like they're watching somebody else struggle, which I think is a really interesting kind of concept. What would you say to them right now that
Find
you
your
want to kind of
rage.
them take
Find your
away from
rage.
this?
Find your
Find your
rage.
rage. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a little bit beyond time to be nice about things, because nicing yourself into anything just doesn't work. It's not enough. Otherwise, things
And
would change.
there isn't a downside, is there now? Like, to finding the rage, like,
Yeah, of course there is.
is there?
There is, but if enough women are angry, then we can't all be ignored.
Mm-hmm. And I think find your rage, but then also find your tribe. Because I think especially
Mm,
if you're like, oh my, if you're alone in a way that you recognize your rage, I feel sometimes that's very daunting when you don't have a tribe. But finding the tribe that are like-minded women or like-minded people, or because even I have some amazing
yeah,
mentors who are men who support that element to make. So I think it's finding your tribe, because that's where you'll be able to assert your voice and leverage that too. Not saying that you can't do it on your own, but when you have that connective tissue and
yeah,
numbers, that's when your voice will be personified even more so. And that's what I
100%. And that's a really nice way to kind of wrap this up almost. I think the three of us found a bit of a tribe of rage, the tribe of rage. Yeah, in doing this together, and there's certainly been, a lot of rage sharing, and also a lot of intel sharing, and yeah, it's just great. And I want to thank both of you for being involved in this with me, and yeah, however,
pleasure.
I mean, I obviously there's been times where this is quite confronting for me, and we've had lots of conversations about it as we go. But I'm gonna share this thing, which was, I think it has really affected me, obviously in a good way, where, like, it's been very late nights sometimes in this room, like editing or watching talks and that kind of stuff. And all the way throughout my career, whenever you've done those like personality tests, um, I've always been like this traditional sort of Myers Briggs ENTP type, right? And even up till, I think, even just before Christmas, I did something which said I'm definitely much more of a thinker than a feeler. And then someone else at work took another test recently, 16 personalities test, and they said, "Oh, come on, do it." And I was like, "Okay." So Sarah did it, Polly did it, and I was like, "Okay, I'm going to do mine." And so suddenly there's like a switch to more introversion. Like, literally, I went over the halfway mark from extrovert to introvert, and the same for thinker to feeler. And I think, what this has helped, and I don't expect other men to just suddenly jump in and watch 12 hours of content. Um, but if you do actually start to become more ingrained, you will become so much more aware of your position and where your position should be in the world versus where perhaps it is, and actually just understand, what women everywhere have had to endure and go through, and the stuff that they just don't tell you about, right? Like, they just don't talk about it, and this has become the perfect platform for you to be able to. And this is what I hope, I think, for you to be able to watch this and go, "Oh, geez, you know what? I've never even given that a second thought." Or, I've always just gone ahead and been able to go, "You know what, I just took that opportunity. Isn't it great? Like, I made, I'm a self-made, or, you've climbed the ladder, but it's because other people have let you, actually, a lot of the time." So I think, you both have helped me come to more realizations, even though I'd like to think I was obviously somewhere towards that point at the beginning of all of this. But
yes, that's why
it's
you're here,
been
Andy.
but it's been pretty confronting when you've got everybody sharing and telling. V, any final thoughts?
No, I think I've said enough for today. And I don't have coffee yet, so my brain's not fully functioning. So,
Well, none of us knew. We could have easily, I think, always very well articulated points, as always, when we chat. So that's it. This thing's never going to end. So who knows? We might do another one. All we'll be doing this time next year is actually recording an update as to how we've been going.
Yeah.
Yes, V.
or also Equal Pay Day, like some keynotes throughout the year too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So if you are, in fact, yes, let's do a call out, because if you are watching this, like the whole point is this never stops. And so like we do want more submissions. I would love it at the end of this year if there's like a week's worth of programming, because what this is like, and I keep explaining this to people, it's like a free to air channel. Some people don't know what that is. You can't watch it on demand at the moment. You have to watch whatever's playing at that point in time, which is actually how we all used to watch TV. But it's jump in at whatever time you're at. You'll probably get to see a different talk. And wouldn't it be great if we had like a week's worth of programming by the end of 2021?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.